Ani, everybody, and welcome to this will be the third town hall in November. We'll be covering line 5. We're going to start off with the land acknowledgement, and this is the Michigan Democratic Party land acknowledgement. The state of Michigan occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabek Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, Ottawa, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and Potawatomi. The Michigan Democratic Party recognizes historic Indigenous communities in Michigan and those forcibly removed from their homelands. We further recognize the ongoing relationship of dependence upon, respect for all living beings of earth, sky, and water. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. We're going to introduce the caucus. This is the Anishinaabek Caucus, the first and only caucus in Michigan that is addressing the needs and concerns of the Anishinaabek people and the Native people in these lands of Michigan. We're new, we're about 2 years old, and we started mostly because of line 5, and then turned out to be other issues. I don't know if everybody knows the history. I had went to a convention in Detroit. Dana Nessel had asked me to attend to help vote for her to get her the primary so she can run for Attorney General. And when I got there, I found out we didn't have a caucus representing our needs. Now, as an industry activist, I can see why everything went so far and just stopped. We built up all of this energy moving to fixing things and changing and working, and it would just die off. And I wondered if that was part of it. So we got Julie Dye is another founding person or member. She's the secretary. Nat Spur, he is our vice chair. And we have Brandy Nahila. She's kind of taking a break right now. She had a rough summer. So Eva Menifee has stepped up as our interim treasurer. So we have an all-star board, I believe. So that's why we're here, is about line 5. Line 5 is a pipeline that's been under the Straits of Mackinac for way too long. We need to get rid of that, shut it down, and stop that tunnel that they have coming through. You'll be finding out in a very short time exactly the damages that could be coming from line 5 when it breaks. Notice I said when, not if. It's already too old. So that's going to be the main topic of this conversation and discussion tonight. We have wonderful panelists here. We have our host, which is Dr. Kyle Whyte. He's a Citizens Potawatomi Nation citizen. He's a professor of environmental justice specialist, and he's a good friend of mine. We have Dr. Aaron Paymont, who's the tribal chairperson for Sault Ste. Marie. He also helped us, the Anishinaabek Caucus. He was on our meeting a bit ago, and he helped us pass a resolution against Custer at the NCAI, which was, we were like so happy. We didn't think that would go through, and Aaron got it for us. Miigwech. I don't think I got to personally thank you for that yet, due to COVID, of course. We have tribal chairperson Jamie Stuck. He's the tribal chair of the Nottawasepi Huron Band of Potawatomi. He's also the vice president of the United Tribes of Michigan. Sean McBrearty will be joining us. He's the director of Clean Water Action. He's also coordinating with Oil and Water Don't Mix. They do a lot of protesting. That was actually how I met Sean, was at different events. We got line 5 and at the Pipe Out Paddle Up that I was helping to, one of the co-organizers. We got Biidaaban Reinhardt. She's a tribal citizen, maybe soon.
Hey, someday.
Of Sault Ste. Marie. Chippewa, Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. She's an environmental justice organizer with We the People. And we have Dr. Martin Reinhardt, and he's also a Sault Ste. Marie tribal citizen. He is president of the Michigan Indian Education Council. So there's our people that are going to be speaking. Oh, I'm going to be speaking also. So I'm going to turn it over to, is that my list? I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kyle Whyte.
Bonjour, friends. It's fantastic to be present with everybody. And I appreciate all of the hard work and dedication and just the spirit work that so many of you are doing on behalf of our communities and behalf of everybody, because line 5 is such a problem. It's such an issue, and it's something that needs to be ended now so we can move on to our potential as Indigenous people, as sovereign people, and creating a new economy, revitalizing our cultures and restoring our communities and our traditions. Each person who's here today is going to briefly share some reflections, some information about the work that they do, about Line 5. And I'm going to take the opportunity to briefly prompt and invite each of our colleagues here when it's time for them to share. And I'm going to start with our distinguished colleagues who are elected officials for tribal nations in Michigan. I'd like to first welcome Aaron, and we're going to transition to first name basis. Many of us have credentials that have titles to them, but not all of us have such credentials. So out of respect to all of the expertise and hard work and all the amazing values that everybody has, we'll switch to a first name basis. And Aaron, it's great that you're here with us. I appreciate your taking the time to share. In addition to some of the biographical information that Andrea shared, I have to say, as a professor myself, I really look up to the fact that you're a scholar and a leader. You're a teacher, you're a researcher, you've made amazing contributions in the scholarship of education. And it's great to see that scholarly expertise happening, given all of the important national and Michigan work that you're doing as a tribal leader. So thanks again, Miigwech, for taking the time to share with us your thoughts on Line 5.
All right. Can you hear me? So I'll start out by saying my most important credential is my GED. Marty shares that with me. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was in kindergarten, we went to the Finlayson School, which was mostly Indian people. And the Indian kids in the school, well, almost all the kids were Indian. The teachers weren't, but we were singing A, B, C, D, kiss my GD. But I could talk a long time on this, so I'm going to try to talk short, and then let me know if I go too long. But my first experience with Enbridge was when I worked for Jamie's tribe. Jamie was my boss, and the spill that happened at the Kalamazoo River, and I won't steal his thunder, but I'll say that it was the Battle Creek Inquirer said that the response was like Keystone Cops. It's the worst inland oil spill in our history, and I'll leave the rest to Chairman Stuck. But I became woke to this issue at that time, and several years later, I got reelected as tribal chair, and I don't even know how this came about, but Oil and Water Don't Mix and Flow reached out to me and asked if I would be part of a press conference in Lansing, and we had a bunch of media there, and Liz Kirkland had outed the fact that there was an easement, and we were asking for a copy of the easement. And when we asked the state that, it took them about 9 months to find this easement, which means nobody had been managing the terms and conditions of the easement from 1954, I think, onward. And so when we finally got a copy of we had to do a FOIA, and when we finally got a copy of it, it said there were certain terms and conditions for this easement to be placed in place. It's around the time that the bottomlands were conferred from the federal government to the state of Michigan without any consultation with tribes. At the time, there was only 3 tribes recognized. My tribe was not recognized at the time. And so we finally got our hands on that easement and found that there were terms and conditions like there had to be anchors installed every 75 feet. So we found, later, Flow and Oil and Water Don't Mix commissioned a dive with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Federation. And that dive showed that there was about 20% of those anchors that were never installed. And then another 20% that were not functional. They were just floating in the water. And so we had to bring that to the attention of the governor. There were several consultations. We had to demand consultations and Governor Snyder, the same guy that poisoned children in Flint. And so we knew that there was no ethics or concern from that governor. And so we had to set forward our interest to the next governor. And really the first person, an elected official in Michigan that cared was Dana Nessel. And she came to a paddle-up protest in Mackinac City, and she spoke. And our connection there, our native connection to Dana Nessel is Holly Bird, and they're friends. And so Holly and I were asked to write her platform, and we included in it what she had already said is that she would support shutting down Line 5. We also put a lot of pressure on and got the governor to campaign to shut down Line 5. She got a little meleeed, and kind of tricked with labor and all these jobs that are going to come with a tunnel. But that's not real. If you talk to the tribal environmental directors, they've done topological reviews of that area, and a tunnel is just not even going to be feasible. The other thing is that the financing that's going to happen to build this tunnel, because Enbridge is not going to put up all the money to build this tunnel, taxpayers are going to be on the hook for these dollars. That's why they tried to put it under the Mackinac Bridge Authority, and they didn't want anything to do with it because they knew there was a tax liability coming. And so think about this for a second. We're transitioning, even though there's the last, the death rattle grip on fossil fuels is happening right now with Manchin leading the way, Senator Manchin, a Democrat, leading the way. So we're talking about a transition away from this lifestyle. And I'm optimistic that in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be a transition out of this lifestyle and our dependence on fossil fuels. We have the technology right now. We're on the cusp of having that technology become monetized to be able to have clean energy. The only reason we don't have it is because we have large subsidies to big oil. So these companies are not even profitable without the large subsidies. And if we were to take the money and transfer the money from big oil, and that's all campaign finance because they buy and sell not only Republicans, but also Democrats. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton was one of those who would not take a position on Dakota Access Pipeline. But the money that is embedded in the politics of this is so integrated that it's difficult to get people to peel away. But the time is coming where investing in fossil fuel infrastructure is a waste of money. And so, if we look 10 years down the road or 15 or 20 years down the road, we build this tunnel if it were even feasible, which it's not. But if it were, eventually Enbridge will abandon the debt retirement on it, and then we're going to be on the hook for it. Taxpayers are going to be on the hook for it. One other thing I'll say, and then I'll hand the mic over, is the U of M did a study of the flows and currents in the Straits of Mackinac, and it's volatile. Even when it looks calm, it's volatile. There's a lot of movement. And so a spill at the Straits will spill 1 million gallons of oil very quickly. And depending on how long that spill happens, if it happens in the wintertime, it's probably going to be weeks that a spill will happen. But if in the best of circumstances, if only 1 million gallons of oil, say, spilled and they were able to shut it off, that's not what they did in Kalamazoo because they pumped more oil through and let it spill for 17. They let it spill for 17 hours. It will choke hold Mackinac Island. Mackinac Island residents will have to be evacuated. Some of this is kind of eerily in our prophecies because that's Turtle Island. And the worst of this is also that the unemployment that will result in the economics of that part of the state, about a third of the state, right? It's really our 1836 treaty territory, will be chokehold, and those people that will be put out of work, their tourism jobs, will have to go on unemployment. And guess who pays for unemployment? All of us. Every Michigan taxpayer will be on the hook to pay for the unemployment for the people who will be without their jobs. So there is something, in politics, it's called not my backyard, NIMBY, what's in it for me sort of thing. There's a threat that will hit everybody's pocketbook when that happens, when that spill happens. And so with that, I'll hand it over and open for questions at some point. And I'm glad that you invited me, and I'm excited to hear what everybody else has to say.
Thanks so much for sharing everything that you did, Aaron. And that's great that you could spend time with us further tonight, though obviously we understand that if governing duties arise, that you'll have to address those important responsibilities that you have. Miigwech. I'd like to move to our next distinguished colleague, Jamie. And I really appreciate Jamie's leadership, not only because I'm a Potawatomi person, but I recognize the unique talents that Jamie brings as somebody who's both had a career addressing community health and wellness, but also community development, and bringing that perspective on the relationship between business, communities, health. And so I really appreciate tribal leaders like Jamie that bring that special background, can really integrate different areas that we know are connected, but often the American political system seeks to separate those things. And the tribe that Jamie as chairperson of had an experience with a spill, and a lot of Jamie's reflections are going to put that experience in perspective with regard to Line 5, and really, I think, speak to where a lot of us are coming from with regard to this this critical issue. Miigwech, Jamie, thanks for being here to share with us.
Oh, gee, Miigwech, it's an honor, and to be amongst leaders within the community that are held in high regard. It's an honor to speak with all of you. As stated, as Kyle stated, I really, as a tribal leader, want to bring the perspective of a tribe that has already acted as a trustee to a spill that's already happened with the Line 6B spill in the Kalamazoo River that happened in July of 2010. It was because of that spill is why we are really relocating our focus, not just to how we're going to maintain the cleanup of the Kalamazoo River spill, but how we're looking at our opposition and decommissioning of Line 5, and the danger to relocating portions of the to the bottom of the Sacred Straits, how it presents a clear and present danger. As stated, we endured a catastrophe brought on by a pipeline spill of Line 6B in July 2010. It devastated the Kalamazoo River after more than 1 million gallons were dumped into the river. This diminished such cultural resources as wild rice. Members could not even access the areas during the cleanup. The Kalamazoo River watershed is central to our tribal identity and has supported a sustainable traditional lifeway for countless generations before us. The loss, usage of ravine resources, the deterioration of habitat, diminished hunting, fishing, and foraging opportunities, and our injured spirit continues to weigh heavily upon our community. In addition to Enbridge's initial reluctance to accept NHPP's participation as a trustee on the Natural Resource Damage Assessment Committee, to the fact that Enbridge has never offered any direct recompense to NHPP for damages sustained until a more recent apology letter came out from Mike Mueller asking for a healing circle. We haven't been reimbursed for. I mean, you can't put a price on cultural resources, first of all. But second of all, we've never been fully reimbursed for what we put into as a trustee, or what should be a trustee, and the team member resources we put from our environmental department, our legal department on assessing the damage to our river and the legal attributes due to the spill. So it's one thing to put a price tag on cultural resources, but they didn't even reimburse us fully for what we did as a tribe to deal with the spill, because it was their fault that the spill happened, and yet we weren't reimbursed fully for it. The ecosystems associated with the river and the tribe itself are far from being healed, and it's taken years to even try to replenish, and we will never fully be restored as far as our access and to the natural state of the Kalamazoo River. NHBP has been on the record opposing the operation of Enbridge Line 5 dual pipeline beneath the Straits of Mackinac, and we've been actively engaged in opposition to Enbridge pipelines. NHBP understands the imminent threat to the Sacred Straits more intimately because of the actual Line 6B catastrophe that we'll be dealing with for generations to come. We, along with the other 11 tribes within the state of Michigan, recognize the interconnection of all waters within the Great Lakes watershed. Therefore, we are interconnected and stand unified in our quest to shut down Line 5. We are unwavering in our resolve to protect the Great Lakes, and we are comprised of one water, and one water is life. So that's where our stance is on Line 5. It very, and no disrespect, but when you're dealing with 12 different sovereign nations within the state of Michigan, there's not too many topics that all 12 sovereign nations can back each other up on and stand together unified at. And this is one item that we are all unified as far as the tribal leadership and tribal nations within the state of Michigan. We are unified as far as our stance on the decommissioning of Line 5. Some of the matters that we have backed up as far as our environmental department in reverence with Line 5, again, is just having that, promoting that regional awareness due to the Line 6B catastrophe and the focus on the aging of Line 5 beneath the Straits. Our department has represented our council on the multi-agency natural resources damage assessment since 2010. Our department continues to coordinate closely with our legal department to regularly submit opposition letters to various facets of Line 5, including permits ranging from maintaining the existing pipeline to the construction of the proposed tunnel. Our department also coordinates closely with our legal department to regularly participate by invitation tribal consultation meetings with the state of Michigan regarding Line 5 issues. At least 2 of these meetings have included the governor of Michigan. The former governor of Michigan actually visited one of our tribe's restoration sites of tribe's wild rice. We always make a reference to the Pine Creek restoration because that's what we could be doing in the Kalamazoo River if we hadn't had this catastrophe happen. Our tribal government and our community representatives have participated in anti-pipeline rallies, NAT being one of them, at the Strait, including the flotilla in the 10-person community canoe. The tribe is on a first name basis with the state executive office tribal liaison from Eagle, making sure that our voice is heard regarding Pipeline 5. And Eagle continues to communicate with us on a regular basis, as far as the permitting and regulatory issues, and all tribes are in the loop on that. We were actually named as a intervener in the lawsuit hosted by Bay Mills Indian Community to oppose Line 5's continued operation and construction of the proposed tunnel. And as a part of that lawsuit, our environmental director, John Rodwin, signed a confidentiality agreement as part of serving as an expert witness. We are, as far as NHBP, the only tribe not within the 1836 treaty area of the Chippewa-Ottawa Resource Authority to be represented in the lawsuit. And the environmental department has presented on countless accounts intertribal and multi-agency forums on impacts from Enbridge pipelines. Right now, the environmental department is continuously keeping our tribal council in the loop. And we actually were able to produce a 30-minute video titled The Great Stain, which acknowledged the 10-year anniversary of the Line 6B spill. And again, as I stated, Enbridge never really reached out for offering an apology or to allow for healing until 10, 11 years after the spill back in 2010. So some of the key points that we have as far as the administration, the administrative bodies and consultation that we've had. Mainly it's been with the Michigan Public Service Commission. They approved the construction of the pipeline. NHBP has participated as an intervener in this case. Neither MPC nor its staff has consulted with tribes prior to taking any or maintaining any position. They would not meet with tribes because of the pending case in front of it. And then the staff ultimately did meet with tribes, but the consultation was in name only. There was no substantive interest or effort to consider what the tribe's perspectives were or to address tribes' concern as it pertains to Line 5. Another issue we had was with the Army Corps of Engineers. They took a very limited review of tribal treaty rights, specifically when it refers to our cultural and historic interests in general. We have not asserted any treaty rights as some other tribes have, but we continuously voice our opinions related to the impact a spill would have to the cultural and traditional ways of life if Line 5 were to give out and bust. To be honest, the one point we did highlight as far as having some positivity was the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority. They were the only ones that really accepted tribal participation prior to any decisions being made, but that was only done via public comment. It wasn't done as far as being able to provide any written information as far as our opposition or any other tribe's opposition to the Line 5 construction. Right now, sadly, as far as considering the overall impact to the Mackinac Straits, the MPC determined that the review of Enbridge's application to relocate a segment of the pipeline would be limited to just along the area of relocation as opposed to the entire line. However, if the pipeline bursts along that route, it will impact a greater area than just the route, just as the Line 6B spill in the Talmadge Creek impacted substantially more than the spill site itself. The MSPC also prohibited arguments on the continued operation of Line 5, though it will consider the impact of the governor's relocation and termination of Enbridge's easement. The MPC also limited the scope of so narrowly that it remains questionable whether NHBP will be able to admit and the MPC to consider the Line 6B event in deciding Enbridge's application. The Army Corps of Engineers suggested replacing the burden on tribes to demonstrate current use of the area to support finding that cultural resources will be affected by the project. Needless to say, this loses sight of the continuous right to use the area and the impact the project will have on future generations' use. Moreover, it loses sight of the cultural, spiritual aspects, including our ceremonies, that cannot be articulated in terms of sufficient to the agency's apparent standards. So right now, just to kind of give you a little bit of breakdown where we are as far as with MPSC, sorry, I think I've been saying it backwards, but I apologize for that. But and the Line 5 opposition, as stated, we've given and tribes given expert testimony as far as their opposition to Line 5, and we have given our expert testimony based on the Line 6B catastrophe. All tribes have provided somewhat of actually a good expert testimony to just opine on the impact this spill, a probable spill for Line 5 would have on our culture, tradition, and the sacredness of the waterways of the tribes. Other tribes like Bay Mills also provided expert testimony regarding the specific impact that this has on our traditional lifeways and treaty preserved rights such as fishing, hunting, and gathering. Ultimately, the MPC will decide whether to grant Enbridge's request to relocate a segment of Line 5 under a tunnel based on A, public need, B, whether it's designed and routed in a reasonable manner, or C, the construction of the pipeline will meet or exceed current safety and engineering standards. However, it will consider those factors based on the limited scope and without a lot of consultation, again, from the 12 sovereign nations with the state of tribe, as in the state of Michigan, sorry. As Dr. Payment has pointed out, all tribes within the state of Michigan have recently signed on to a letter urging President Biden to speak up in support of our tribes and to protect our Great Lakes. As some may know, the Canadian government is putting a lot of pressure on President Biden to oppose the effort against Enbridge. It recently invoked a 1977 international treaty which established transit pipelines between the countries, including Line 5. So we've been very active, and it's good to hear the news that did come out of the White House summit today, that hopefully we're going to get some support on this from President Biden. But your tribes do stand united as we continue our efforts to protect the waterways of the Great Lakes and to continue to oppose Line 5 and to protect our waterways, protect life, and to make sure that we don't have another catastrophe like 6B, and to make sure that we all stick together in this opposition. So with that being stated, I'm sorry if I went over a little bit, but I want to thank the opportunity and say Chimigwech just for the honor of being able to speak on this matter. As stated before, this is a matter of life for us now, as far as how we're still responding to Line 6B. Our tribal community has been forever impacted by Enbridge's negligence and their ability to run pipelines. So with that being stated, on behalf of the great nation of the Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi, Chimigwech for the opportunity. Ahau.
Miigwech, Jamie, and thanks for all of your sharing. And, we're not too worried about time here because we're all speaking from the heart and from the spirit. And so I appreciate the heart that you brought and all of the updates about the actions that are taking place. And I really appreciate hearing how Nottawassippi Huron Band of Potawatomi is taking action and leadership in relation to some of the tribes that are located more near to the pipeline itself. And so we appreciate again your being here, and any further time you spend with us is fantastic. Though similar to Aaron, we understand you have governing duties that may call or have already called. We will certainly be understanding of that. So thanks again. And I just want to give another shout out to our two elected officials who spoke with us. And again, thank you for your service. The next colleague who's going to share with us, I'd like to bring back in Andrea. And Andrea, we appreciate your opening the event and activity. And really, I'm a big admirer of the different levels of leadership that you bring. You're both willing to take the time to be present and be a speaker and a leader in spaces like this. But I also know from being on the Anishinaabek Caucus and also knowing you and other connections as well, all of the background work that you do, the work that not everybody knows about, the work that's not always thanked or known. So I appreciate how you bring all of these dimensions of leadership, including being out there on the front lines with the direct action. So Miigwech, thank you for taking some time to share further reflections about Line 5.
Oh, Miigwech, and thank you for asking me. I really appreciate it. When I started the caucus and got such wonderful people working with me on this. It all started from Line 5. It really did. Line 5 would affect my tribal lands, and I may be 300 miles away, but at the same time, it will affect my family. It'll affect my people up north. It'll affect our culture, our traditions, how we would learn, what we would learn. It would just be a loss. And when you add into the fact that there's also hidden dangers, not only will Line 5 devastate the cultural traditions, our water, our everything, but it'll also bring, when they build that tunnel, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, which is something that we must also consider when we're thinking about building a tunnel and keeping Enbridge alive and floating, I guess. So that is something that will come from that. We've already seen from Line over there in Wisconsin and Minnesota, when they're building the pipelines out there, what's happening. There's already been charges of human sexual trafficking. And that's another level that we have to remember always, because we got a lot of tribes that pipeline will cross, and it's our women and children and our men too, that will be suffering. And we need to keep that at the forefront of our mind. I think that pipeline should have not have been made. It should have been, but I wasn't there then. I really found out about it during when Kalamazoo had their oil spills. Around then that I found out. And I remember watching that, all those stories coming through on Facebook and everything when that happened. And it was just horrific. I remember all the people coming up, and they had like events for people to bring different donations of Dawn dish soap. And they were looking for people who would come and take care of the animals and help clean them off. You had a whole criteria. And then like the next day, that list was gone, and Enbridge blocked everybody out and put a big fence around it and took care of it themselves. Well, we see how they took care of it, right? It's still there. It's not cleaned up. It can never be cleaned up. It's a fallacy. It's a lie. And we need to address that. So, and that's what I remember from that, being that over here in Ann Arbor area, because I was going to try and come out and help. And then, like I said, within 24 hours, it was blacked off. Well, that turned out to be that time frame when Enbridge was pumping more oil through. They were unaware of what was happening. And that was around the time that I found out that we also had a pipeline up north that was getting ready to break. So I started fighting against that then. And I got a lot of wonderful people who have worked with me. There's just so many of us on the ground in different groups. And that was part of why we did the pipe out, paddle up flotilla. Janann Cornstalk, who's a tribal citizen of Little Traverse Bay Bands, the Dow Indians, her and I did that. She came to me and we were talking about it. And it started off from that Greenpeace where they had all those canoes and big floats in the water. And we wanted to try and do something like that here to bring awareness. And that was how that started. And part of it was to make us stronger. It wasn't just a group of natives doing this. We brought in legislators, we brought in tribal leaders, we brought in tribal citizens, we brought in Michigan citizens, environmental organizations. We are stronger together. And that was what we were working on. Every year we were making it bigger, bringing in more people, more groups. And that's how you get things changed. The more people that are aware of things, the more people that are fighting in different ways. Right? If we just keep hitting the same spot, it'll never change. But if you try over here, hit there, eventually you put so much pressure on, something is going to stop or explode. Hope not the pipeline yet. And that's what we're working for. It was just a camaraderie of getting people together, stronger, building, and that's worked. We met Dana Nessel. I met her out in Ann Arbor, and she told me she wanted to shut down Line 5, and she came up to the flotilla and talked to everybody. And she has been amazing. She was the first legislator to sue in our behalf, Enbridge, against Line 5. Took a little bit for the governor, but we worked on her on that. Caucuses, we're partnered with Native American caucuses and the DNC. And we also have partnered with other caucuses in the Democratic Party. And we've sent letters to our governor asking her to shut down Line 5, keep your promises. We took it off of her webpage that had still at the time said, my first thing when I walk in will be to put down my purse and shut down Line 5. And we're like, well, okay, it's been like day 280. It's still going. What's going on now? And we pushed her. We pushed and pushed. We kept sending letters. We kept making an issue of it. And that's where we're at. These people are working. And it's not just one person, it's a whole bunch of us, which is really beautiful. We get the flotillas and the canoes in the water at the paddle up flotilla. And it's a beautiful day. We have fun together. We talk, we work things out. We make t-shirts, we make signs, there's drumming. It's just beautiful. And at the same time, it's all about line 5. And we're sitting there looking at the water thinking, anytime we got to stop it. And that's what we're working for. One of the ways I have found is that since we have Dana Nessel and Governor Whitmer have both proven that elected officials can make a difference. And that's something we need to consider. Everybody should consider running for office. You don't have to have a degree in political science. You just have to care. You have to care an awful freaking lot about your water, about your people. And that's how we're going to get changes. When I went to convention and found out that we didn't have a caucus, that we had been left out, I came home stomping mad. I was like, this is why nothing changes. We are stuck. We are being ignored. Why? Because we're not part of it. We are not part of the issues. We're not part of the fix. We are left out outside the door with our signs not being heard. So we're changing that. This caucus is working towards that in so many different ways. And a lot of it's going to be line 5. And that Custer statue is going too. But that's another one. So that's where I'm at with it, is trying to do this in a positive manner, in a good way, and to bring our tribal voice to the fight. We need to be able to be a part of this fight. It's going to affect us. It's going to affect our lands, our traditions, our children. I mean, when line 5 breaks and the fish are gone, we're going to lose a whole clan system and all those teachings. Think about that. Who's going to be able to teach the fish clan anything? They're not going to know. They'll have to go somewhere else to learn about their clan. That's not right. That's how deeply we will be affected. Our animals, Makwa and bear and wolf, who eat those fish. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to them? I mean, there's just so many different ways that this is going to affect us. And we need to stand up and we need to fight it with everything we have, everything. I have been in the streets. I didn't get to go to DAPL. I sat here. We had a pipeline coming in down about a mile from my house. One point, I was doing 5 protests a day in 1 week. I was exhausted, but we didn't stop. We had people showing up and people with signs and people writing the governor and the legislators and making a loud noise. We didn't stop. We kept going, every single one of us, no matter how cold it got. But that's where we're at now. We've pushed this to a point now where now even the president's listening to us. We've got Deborah Haaland as the Secretary of the Interior. I mean, we can make some changes, but they need backup. You got to run for office. When something comes down, it's getting squashed by Republicans. Why? Because we're not there. We are not there, and we need to stand up and say, I want to be at that table and run for office. Any office. Run for, we already saw how important county commissioner was when they passed those resolutions from Enbridge, right? About how great and wonderful they were. Did you read those resolutions? They're ridiculous. They got passed. Why? Because those Republicans and our county commissioners, they go to training in Mackinac. Who sponsors it? Enbridge. Who sponsored our governor's inauguration? Enbridge was on that list, and so was DTE and Consumers Power. That's where we're at. That's why we have to get up there and change all of this. We really do. When our government is being bought out by the enemy, and to me at this point, they are the enemy, then we need to take it all down. We need to rebuild. We need good people who care an awful lot. Like that, what's that book they talk about with that, the trees? We need to do that. We really do. Run for office, make a change. Write your legislators, make a change. And that's it for me. Did I take too long?
Andrea, I'll say the same thing I said to Jamie and all of our colleagues. If speaking from the heart and the spirit, don't worry about time. Just share what you know and share what you feel. It's a tremendous gift that everybody is here talking together about these incredibly threatening and challenging issues, but I'm also inspired by the actions that everyone has described so far, all sorts of different actions that are making change and are very inspiring. So miigwech for your work as an organizer and movement builder, Andrea, and all the other important things that you do to support so many of us. I'd like to move to our colleague, Sean, who we appreciate joining us. And Sean is somebody that one way that I know them is through the work that I've done for a long time with the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition. We seek to address environmental justice issues across the state affecting many Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities and communities facing a number of different challenges statewide. And I've really appreciated in the time I've known Sean, their dedication to the well-being of citizens of Michigan, of the public, of our welfare, keeping people informed, being on top of the policies and translating what's happening without much of our consent and acknowledgement, translating that to us so that we can know the important ways to take action. And so we appreciate all of your dedication, Sean, and we know you spend many hours keeping on top of all of the just complexity of what's happening with just an issue like Line 5, in addition to other areas that you contribute to. So miigwech, and thanks again for taking the time to share, Sean.
Yeah, miigwech, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm glad to be able to spend some time with you all. It's good to see friendly faces today. I'm sure some of you have probably heard we got a very disappointing court ruling today on Line 5. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are now in relation to that. Earlier this afternoon, Judge Neff in the federal court case ruled on the state's motion to remand the case to state court. And she denied the request to remand to state court, meaning that this case is going to stay in federal court. So the only way that this case can now be won in court is through the federal court system, which, the state has a very strong case here, even in federal court, but it takes a lot longer to get through state court, to get through federal court than it does through state court. And, this decision today means that Enbridge, this giant foreign oil corporation, has secured at least temporary success in protecting their oil profits at any cost, even when it means, as we all know, keeping our Great Lakes at such a tremendous risk. However, there is still a lot that can be done. There's a lot that we've done so far. I think one of the most powerful things about the Line 5 fight over the last several years is how so many from across Michigan have come together. I've personally felt lucky to build so many wonderful relationships with Native American activists across Michigan who care about this issue, and with the sovereign tribal leadership, Chairman Payment and Chairman Stuck on the call today, and several others across the state. I've felt lucky to be able to build these connections and to work together over this long of a time period. We've built a heck of a campaign. We're all working together to shut down Line 5, and that work continues. Back in 2014, when the Snyder administration was talking about this issue, I remember with the oil and water campaign, we were very disappointed in 2014 when Governor Snyder was reelected. We knew that Snyder and Schuette were not going to do anything that was going to help us shut down Line 5, and we decided in late 2014, in November, December, we got together in a campaign meeting and we decided that we were going to spend 4 years educating the public, and we were going to spend 4 years making sure that the people who ran for governor and attorney general in 2018 had to take a stance on Line 5, which seemed pretty audacious back in 2014. Since then, one of my favorite stories that I've heard in this fight is from our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who talks about being at one of our Oil and Water Don't Mix educational meetings that we did for the Plymouth Democratic Party. And she was attending as just a member of the Plymouth Dems. And she asked a question, and asked if the Attorney General could file a lawsuit and shut down Line 5. And I was like, yes, absolutely, the Attorney General can do that. And she turned to her wife, Elena, and said, I think I'm going to run for Attorney General. And Elena laughed. And then a while later, that became a reality. And, we were able, all working together, to get Attorney General Nessel elected. And when Governor Whitmer didn't act right away, we got collectively throughout this campaign, we got over 80,000 phone calls into Governor Whitmer's office from everyday constituents asking her to take action. And you know what? Now that Judge Neff has made this short-sighted, errant judgment that ignores the sovereignty of the 12 tribes of Michigan, ignores the sovereignty of the state of Michigan, and attempts to give it all away to a foreign oil company. Now that she's made this sort of a short-sighted ruling, and we're looking down a long federal court process, we're going to take the same kind of fight that we took to Attorney General Nessel and to Governor Whitmer to get them to take the right kinds of action. We're going to take that same fight to the White House. So a couple weeks ago, I think it was mentioned earlier on tonight, but all 12 of the tribal sovereigns in Michigan sent a wonderful letter to President Biden's administration with 3 simple asks for President Biden. And I'm going to go into what those are. The first ask was that if Canada wants to invoke this bogus 1977 Transit Pipeline Treaty, the treaties that are over 100 years older than that treaty, the ones, of course, that let Michigan become a state, that the United States government signed with the tribes, must play a role here, and that the tribes deserve a seat at the table for any sort of treaty negotiations between Canada and the United States. The second ask was that the federal government intervene in this court case. Enbridge is right now arguing federal preemption, which is to say that they are arguing that the federal government is the only one who can shut down the pipeline. If the federal government steps in and says, no, the state can do this, it pretty much destroys Enbridge's argument. And the third ask, which I think is a very important one, is that Biden consider revoking the presidential permit for Line 5. And I'm going to go a little bit into what that means, because that is game over. If Biden does that, it is game over for Enbridge on both the existing pipeline and the tunnel. Now, the presidential permit for any pipeline does not cover the whole pipeline. It doesn't cover, it doesn't cover actually the Straits of Mackinac. It covers where the pipeline crosses the international border back into Canada. So the crossing at Sarnia. If Biden revokes the presidential permit, which he can actually do without any reason, he doesn't even need a reason. However, that's not to say he doesn't have one. The existence of the presidential permit is predicated upon Enbridge being in compliance with the easement granted by the state of Michigan, which Enbridge has not been in compliance with that easement since 1968. And the easement, in fact, no longer exists since Governor Whitmer has revoked it. So since they are not in with the easement, President Biden could at any time revoke the presidential permit, which would shut down the existing Line 5 pipeline. Now, let's say something bad happens and Biden revokes the easement, but then we wind up with a president in 2024 who wants to let Line 5 continue to function or put it back into operation. Well, they'd have to start all over with a new presidential permit, which means a whole at least 2 to 3 year process through the Army Corps of Engineers and through several different governmental agencies before they could do that. So Biden revoking the presidential permit would not only shut down the existing pipeline, but since it inhibits Enbridge's ability to cross back into Canada on Line 5, it would theoretically stifle the tunnel plan as well, because they'd have no reason to build an oil tunnel if they can't actually get the oil back into Canada. So, these are 3 very important asks, and it was such, I think, a wonderful forward-thinking move by Michigan's tribal sovereigns to make that request. And actually, myself and a couple colleagues are headed to Washington, D.C. tomorrow for some meetings with folks in the Biden administration to talk to them about these asks and let them know that these asks are coming from Michigan's tribal sovereigns with the full-throated support of the environmental community and of progressives in Michigan, and that President Biden needs to stand with us and take action on this one. We're also going to be holding Thursday morning. It'll be live streamed on Oil and Water Don't Mix's Facebook page. I know many of you follow us there. Thursday afternoon, Justin Trudeau will be in Washington, D.C. to meet with President Biden. Thursday morning at 10, we will be holding a press conference at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. To call out Prime Minister Trudeau's hypocrisy on climate change. And to ask President Biden to help us on this one. We're also going to be having, for those of you who may be in the Detroit area, President Biden will be in Detroit tomorrow, and we are organizing a little greeting party for the president of folks with Line 5 signs, so that while he's driving in his motorcade from Detroit Airport to the Ford plant, he'll be seeing people with signs asking him to take action on Line 5. So we have that. We have a lot more coming up. We're going to have an action that we're going to ask everybody to take. I'm actually writing it later tonight and hoping to get it out to folks tomorrow. But we're going to have a sample email that we're going to ask everybody to send to the White House, echoing those 3 asks that were made first by Michigan's tribal sovereigns 2 weeks ago. And we want folks across the street. We got 80,000 calls into Governor Whitmer. Let's beat that. Let's get hundreds of thousands of emails to the White House and just inundate them with these requests, which would satisfy, which would solve this entire problem. So again, thank you all so much for having me tonight. It's great to join you. And I'll be sticking around if anyone has questions later on.
Miigwech, we appreciate everything you shared, Sean, and we're going to be right there alongside for all the actions that you described. And I hope you have a safe trip. I know it's going to be a significant and impactful trip. So thanks for going to Washington and orchestrating all that you described. And yeah, thanks for sticking with us for some of the conversation a little bit later.
Yeah.
I'd like to move to prompt our next colleague, Biidaaban. In one of the times that I met Biidaaban when they were studying in graduate school, I was really struck by how they were bringing Indigenous knowledge to spaces in science and engineering and planning and just doing it unapologetically, just like it should be, right? We have a right to be in these spaces and to have our values and our knowledge and our wisdom just be the way that we operate. And I'm really inspired by scholars and organizers and leaders like Biidaaban who just do that naturally. It's hard work to just embody that this is the normal way to do things. And it's a way that can exist and succeed even in spaces that might initially be hostile to our ways and our communities. So I appreciate all that you do and all that you bring and all of your knowledge, Biidaaban, and thanks for taking the time to share with us your reflections.
Yeah, Chimagwaj. And yeah, we had a couple good potlucks out there in New York there in my grad school. So yeah, so Chimagwaj for the introduction. So bonjour everyone. Biidaaban Indigenous Caucus, Bawa Tingandon Jaba, Ajajakandoram, Anishinaabek Caucus. Hi everyone, my name is Biidaaban Reinhardt. I'm a citizen of the Sioux Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, as mentioned before. I am Crane Clan. And I'm here today as the environmental justice organizer with We the People Michigan. So whenever we were talking about shutting down Line 5, the conversation, as we've been discussing here today, veers towards logistics. What would happen? What would the world look like if and when the pipeline bursts? Not if, but when. Well, those are very valid points. What we often don't see is the vision for what our future could look like once this pipeline is shut down and all the pipelines are shut down. So this vision for the future that I'm going to be talking about comes from my own experiences in my community, as well as the research I did in grad school in sustainable construction and incorporating my own traditional ecological knowledge into my studies, as well as the work that I'm doing now as an environmental justice organizer. So, as an Anishinaabe Ojibwe woman, I was raised with our traditional values, such as the seven grandfather teachings, the medicine wheel teachings, and as well as one that many of you have, I'm sure, heard about, called the seven generations philosophy. What this says is that what we do today will have reverberating impacts for 7 generations into the future. These teachings have guided me throughout my entire life. While I went to school, while I attended protests and gatherings with my family, it brought me into the path of STEM, into science and into sustainability research. Eventually, at one point in my life, I was involved in nanoparticle physics research to create solar panels. However, that all changed in 2016 when I was in my bed one night waiting for class the next morning, and I saw my friends and family get shot with water cannons and rubber bullets in the North Dakota plains. The next day, I sat in my physics class that day, not hearing a single word about whatever math function I was supposed to be learning that day, because I knew that at that moment I needed to make a change, that my people needed help today, not 30 years in the future with some hypothetical novel technology. So I switched gears to zoom out and see the big picture. How do we move from surviving to thriving communities? When we're trying to shut down Line 5 or any pipeline, really, the most important thing we can do is foster our relationships, not just the existing ones and not just ones between natives, but for all beings. Natives, non-natives, human and non-human, such as our animal relatives, our plant relatives, the water, the air, all of it, all of our relations, into a balanced, value-driven future. This is a way to welcome anyone who shares a similar value system, one that respects and honors all beings on this planet, to join and work with us in this fight for all of our collective future. A prime example of this is what we saw happen at Standing Rock. So this movement started with just a few people, mostly Native women from that community and youth, a large group of youth from that community who ran across the country in order to bring that specific injustice to the attention of the administration at the time. That movement that started with just a couple of people grew into a gathering of over 10,000 people from across the globe who came into a fight against that one pipeline. That was not the first, and it will not be the last. And so far, this movement has largely been guided by Indigenous people, such as all of us here on this call right now. If we are to make substantial change in our energy future, we need everyone, absolutely everyone involved in this for all of our future generations. We need to look back at our traditional ecological knowledge and instill it with Indigenous science of today in order to picture and develop what our future could look like, from the immediate future, such as shutting down Line 5, just this one pipeline, to maybe like more of a medium term, a couple decades from now, transitioning from fossil fuels entirely with renewable energies, which, by the way, those technologies are already there. We haven't invested in them yet. All the way to more of a long-term visioning future of what a decolonized, revitalized, just future could look like for everyone. Our ancestors already knew how to live in a sustainable way without these extractive harms done to each other and to Mother Earth, taking only what we need and giving back when we can. And that is a future that's worth fighting for. That is a future we should all be moving towards. Right now, we are here discussing this one pipeline that runs through the Straits of Mackinac, but that Straits of Mackinac connects all of the Great Lakes. That at any point, this pipeline could rupture and impact all of North America, the waterways that touch every single animal, plant, and persons for decades to come. We've already seen what happens when a pipeline bursts over one river downstate. Imagine that all that oil going into 5 Great Lakes and all the waterways that connect through that entire system. This is not the only pipeline. It will not be the last. So yes, we need to shut down Line 5, Line 3, Line 6B, DAPL, all of them. But what we also need to do is look out, look ahead, and see what our future could look like. We stand here, well, technically sit here, at a crossroads, a choice that we could sit and wait for the world leaders to gather, which they have done, And they've decided that there's nothing we can do about the burning earth. Or what we can do is we can say no. They're not the only ones living on this planet. They're not the only ones whose futures will be impacted. The youth are the ones who are going to be up and coming and facing the brunt of their decisions. So we can either throw in the towel or come together with other people who hold the same values as us and make change happen. The need for relationship building should not come at the cost of compromising our own value system. So this is an invitation to invite those that are willing to listen and change their minds in the fight for all of us, for all of our land, culture, food, energy, and especially clean water, today and into the future for all of our generations. Miigwech.
Miigwech Biidaaban. And wow, you really centered that this is about our vision. And, imagine if our visions as Indigenous people, as Anishinaabe people, were ones that were more predominant in the way that things occurred here in Michigan, here in the Great Lakes region. Imagine the world we'd be in. No climate crisis, empowered young people. We benefit from the wisdom of our youth and the knowledge that they bring. Wow. And it's about vision, and it's about removing the dominant vision that's got us into this situation in the first place. And so we appreciate so much, Biidaaban, your sharing with us, Miigwech, and look forward to engaging further. As the moderator, I am going to offer a couple of my own cents. I want to super briefly just cover one area, and then I'll move to prompt Marty. But just before I do that, I wanted to say that one of the things that is part of the work that I've been doing on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council is, we have a council of 26 persons. There's 4 Native folks, and everybody is experienced in environmental justice work, supporting communities, empowering communities. And we've produced recommendations. We've talked about environmental justice issues, and literally the whole Line 5 thing, whether the current one, the current pipeline, or the tunnel, the whole Line 5 thing is literally against the entire program that the Biden-Harris administration is advancing on environmental justice. And it's not environmental justice in a narrow sense. The Biden-Harris administration has an initiative called Justice 40 in Executive Order 14008. Justice 40 states that 40% of the benefits of major federal investments in infrastructure, including energy infrastructure, 40% has to flow to communities that are disadvantaged, that have been already overwhelmed by multiple environmental stressors. And that 40% benefits is not just like a random dollar value. It's real community benefits, actual community change, communities emerging as leaders in the energy transition. That's a policy that the Biden administration brought to the Conference of Parties in Glasgow, that the domestic policy was about justice and equity. And I can't think of anything more unlike the Justice 40 initiative than Line 5. It's backward economically. It creates problematic forms of dependence. It locks us into a high carbon footprint. It violates treaty rights. It's a threat to so many different communities, including Indigenous people that have stewarded those territories for generations. And so to suggest that Line 5 needs to be continued, or even I don't know what the right word is, that money needs to be put into having a tunnel to keep it going, is literally against everything that the Biden-Harris administration has laid out in executive order, and the groups like the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council are recommending. In our recommendations from May of 2021, we were very clear that there are many things that the federal government can support that do not benefit communities, any community. Line 5 and what it represents is absolutely one of those things that if governments support it, it has no benefit to communities. And so it's important to note that the United States is not going in the direction of something like line 5. We're trying to create real change. We're trying to establish environmental justice, and we're trying to put in place a situation where Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities emerge as leaders in the just and equitable energy transition, and not something where we're just trying to figure out ways to save industries, which we know have a horrible track record starting generations ago, and industries that we know were able to take root and contribute to the high carbon footprint because they dispossessed us Indigenous people, of our land. And so it's painful for us to think that these industries should be further coddled and supported when the way in which they were allowed to take root and expand as fast as they did and create the climate change crisis that we have right now was because of the original dispossession of our communities, the shrinkage of our land base, and the threat of assimilation. And so I appreciate the vision, the actions, the words that everybody has shared. And I would like to ask our colleague Marty to also share. And Marty is the professor that I wish I had, whether an undergraduate or a graduate school. Like I really wish I had professors like you, because you model exactly what it means to succeed within an institution of higher education, but do so in a way that doesn't compromise on the work that matters to so many of our communities. And so it's fantastic to have models like you that are showing what it means to work in higher education and what it means to do it in a native way, and what it means to be uncompromising in the fact that what you bring are native priorities and values and Indigenous knowledge. And so again, yeah, shoot, imagine I could have been doing all sorts of better things if I had taken some of your classes instead of so we appreciate your taking the time to share with us, Marty.
Miigwech, Kyle, Andrea, Chairman Payment, Chairman Stuck. Proud dad here, Biidaaban. What a beautiful speech. My goodness. And the other speakers, I appreciate the spirit energy you all put into this. It's very serious. You know, I wish I had professors like, you know, the ones that we're trying to be. You know, I guess that's what they say, right? Be the ancestor that you always wanted. Be the one that's going to make a difference. And I certainly try. You know, I want to talk a little bit about our rights. You know, we've had some folks mention treaty rights and, you know, what we're able to do under the laws of our tribes, of the federal government, and the states. And I say them in that order, purposefully. We have, as tribal people, Aboriginal rights, we have treaty rights, and we have civil rights. All of them have been violated by Enbridge, all of them. Our Aboriginal rights are inherited from our ancestors. And, you know, our ancestors provided us just what Biidaaban said. You know, they thought 7 generations into the future. They provided us with not just the Aboriginal rights, but the Aboriginal responsibilities to care for those beings, those relatives that include the fish, include the deer, the bear, those plants. You know, those are very important to us, part of our Aboriginal responsibilities. Our treaties go back to the Treaty of Juenjigawen. That's that treaty with the plants and animals. We're taught that that's our first treaty, and that they gave up their lives, and all they asked in return is that we care for them. That's an absolute. We have no choice in that. And we need to make sure that people understand that is our first treaty, and we will do everything we can to uphold that responsibility. We have other treaties too that are often overlooked. The treaties that we have with other tribal nations, treaties between the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy and the Haudenosaunee, treaties between the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy and the Lakota Nation. Those are important treaties. And in those treaties, we said as we sat there and smoked our plogon, our pipes with them, and created wampum, that we would care for the plants and animals in common, because we understood that all of our lives depended on good relations. All the way back to the treaty with Great Britain, our first treaty with a foreign nation. You know, that treaty of 1764, that Silver Covenant Chain Treaty, when the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy made that covenant chain with that foreign nation, and they understood that we existed as our own sovereign and that we had these responsibilities to care for the land because the land cares for us. We were never these individually divided segments of the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy. We were always Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. And that's how we should present ourselves today in a united front. When we have ambiguity in our identity, we need to make sure that the other folks who are, you know, talking about treaties between the United States and Canada, that they understand that we have treaties that predate theirs, as was mentioned this evening, and that they are very important to us, and that they are living treaties, that we feast our treaties. We signed, as the Anishinaabe Three Fires Confederacy, over 74 treaties with the United States. Out of 372 treaties and 13 treaty supplements signed between the indigenous peoples of the United States and the United States of America and federal government, 147 contain education provisions. And I'm here to tell you that I've looked at them, every single one of them, read them word for word, completed countless hours of analysis on these things. And I can tell you one thing, our treaties, our rights to education depend on a quality relationship with Mother Earth. You know, these are the things that we can't not do. And we cannot go out and teach our children to love Mother Earth the way we love her, the way we're supposed to love her when it's oil soaked. That's not how we love Mother Earth. Akinomage, our term for education, it literally means the earth will show us the way. And that is our responsibility to then uphold those teachings and to love her back. 295 treaties signed between our tribes and the federal government containing food provisions, rights to hunt, fish, gather, farm, to mill. Those are very important. 52 of those were signed by our Anishinaabe tribes. Let me tell you, one of the most important things to tribes is food sovereignty, food security. And if we don't have that, as Winona LaDuke says, we don't have sovereignty. And I'm sorry, but you can't drink oil, you can't eat poisoned fish. So if we're going to teach our kids how to respect Mother Earth, how to truly have food security, food sovereignty, we have to have a place to do it. You know, Turtle Island is what we call this place. And we have many Turtle Islands, right? Turtle Island, Mackinac Island. Turtle Island, Dobby was talking about out at Standing Rock. There's a little Turtle Island out there. Has a burial ground that they just trampled right over as we stood there on that Thanksgiving Day, giving thanks for our relations. And they just looked at us across that Constantina wire fence and trampled all over the graves of the Lakota ancestors buried there. we have to love the place that we live. That's our responsibility. I really appreciate everyone's contributions to this fight, to this ongoing protect, because that's really what it is. It's protecting our relations. It's protecting our futures. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Marty, we appreciate your thoughts and the history that you told and the stories that you told and just those living treaties and what they mean for our communities today, but just the direction that they give us, the guidance that they give us. And this is what our Anishinaabe ancestors, this is what they did, what they created for us. So we appreciate, again, your taking time to share. And, you know, Andrea started us off by grounding us, but I appreciate, Marty, how you grounded us at the end and gave us that, gifted us that perspective. And so I appreciate, again, what everybody shared, and thanks for closing with that as well, Marty. And I'd like to, just in a few minutes that we might have to see if our colleagues here in the caucus or other guests who are able to join us for this recording would like to ask a few questions. And if the panelists would be able to turn their cameras on, unless you're occupied with other things. I know it's the evening, but if you can turn your cameras on, that would be great. And anybody who needs to leave, go for it, right? we know you've got different things to do, but just give us a wave and we'll definitely see you later at one of the actions that's been described. But anyways, I will ask Andrea to join me in moderating some questions with our colleagues. And so I'm thinking maybe we can respond to about 3 different questions. So if there's anybody, whether you're a caucus member or a guest who is here, let us know. Do you have a question? Did you put something in the Zoom or the chat? Do you want to come on to camera? Do you want to raise your hand using the function? However you want to get our attention. Andrew and I will be looking. So, Andrew, did you see anybody that put a question in the chat? Oh, Andrew, if you could just push that one button, the button whose name we will not speak of anymore.
Barb has a question.
Okay, Barb.
Hi, I want to say miigwech to all the presenters. It was very informative and inspiring and heartbreaking too, and motivating. And so I really appreciate all of the words that were shared. One of the questions I have is, how much are we focusing on the question of cleanup of the spills? And I ask that because back in 1985, I spent a month in Prince William Sound, kayaking and studying seals and sea otters there. And in 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil spill happened, and it happened exactly where I had been. The woman who was the professor of my field study group continued to go back to that spot every year up until I think about maybe 6 years ago when her health declined to where she couldn't. And what she told me was that the wildlife had not returned, that you could still turn over rocks and there was oil underneath the rocks. And while you were talking, I looked up to see if there had been some studies done on the long-term impacts of the oil spill on the environment. And indeed, there are tremendous long-term impacts that have been documented. And I always think it's really important when they talk about cleanup and they have these drills and everything, that it's really an illusion. There really isn't a cleanup. I mean, you can maybe get rid of some of the visual signs of the oil, but as far as its impact on the environment, it's just not going to go away. And so I'm wondering, and anyone who's on the panel can talk to that point.
can I just take a few seconds to say that under our treaty rights, we don't have to wait until there's a spill to invoke them.
Mhm.
The law is on our side in that respect. Now, if you're a citizen of the state of Michigan, you don't have the same rights as tribes.
Mhm.
In fact, in many ways, the citizens of the state of Michigan have to prove damage, right, in order to invoke the kind of laws that are going to bring remedy. But tribes have the ability to look into the future and say, you know what, there's a reasonable expectation, especially looking at what Enbridge has done in our territories before, that we're going to suffer significant damage to our treaty resources, which that's a term that we probably will use, even though they're life sources. But we have reasonable expectations that will happen because it's happened down there in the Kalamazoo River. And we have a model that's research based that shows it will happen eventually in the Straits. So I just wanted to throw that in there. We don't have to wait. We have the right to move forward now if that's what we choose to do.
Miigwech.
Thanks, Marty. I think we'll move on to another question. We have a colleague here. When we were originally doing this event as a simultaneous Facebook Live event before we moved to record it, we had some great journalist colleagues that were going to join us here. And so Hannah Northey from Energy and Environment News has a question.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it. I wanted to just ask if you have any sense at this point, either from connections that you may have in the administration. We just had this 2-day White House summit. It was really interesting. If you have any sense of sort of where the administration is at on this, what they're thinking, and if they are, I don't know, considering pulling these presidential permits. I'm just wondering what kind of insight you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. Would one of our colleagues wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I think you're in better shape with this administration that you would have been in with the previous one, right? But as stated earlier, all 12 tribes did sign off on a letter to President Biden. Homework time. It did. So all 12 sovereign nations did sign off to a letter to President Biden, asking him for his help with this. Again, Dr. Payment had spoke to some of the subject matter being brought up today during the summit. I wasn't able to jump on today's summit, but I would probably refer to him on that. I don't know if he's still on the Zoom, but again, I think we're in a better shape right now with Governor Whitmer having a closer relationship with President Biden, and him knowing her battles with what she's going through with Enbridge. But I mean, that's pretty much what I can probably provide. The good thing is that we are lobbying the president for his support. And Michigan, with a lot of different things when it comes to him recognizing sovereignty, we've kind of been out in the forefront on other things, not just environmentally, but health-wise, like with the racial disparities that we've been dealing with the COVID-19. So he does pay attention to the sovereign nations of Michigan. Just a little bit more hopeful with this administration that we were with the last. So that's my input.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jamie. We appreciate it. We'll move on to our final question. Andrea, did you notice a question that's in the queue, or should we open it up to people to voice their question?
Yeah, I don't see any more questions. Did you get any offline?
I haven't seen any yet, so maybe that means it's an opportunity for somebody to turn on the camera and make their presence known.
Kyle, if I might comment on the previous question, because I cut off, my internet upstairs isn't as good as it is downstairs. As far as looking at the cost of a probable, or when a spill happens, another spill happens. As I stated earlier, you can't put a price on your cultural resources. And if if anybody wants to really experience the aftermath of an oil spill catastrophe, just come to Battle Creek. They'd be more than happy to take you down to the landing. You could still see the crude sediment on the bottom of the Kalamazoo River. And just imagine the depth of the straits compared to that river. So again, if anything, or when anything happens with the straits, the depths of the straits, that's the worrisome thing, is that we're trying to control, the spill 10, 11 years after the Line 6B spill, and the depths shouldn't be unmanageable, right? So, but as stated earlier, we'll be dealing with it for generations to come, and getting the full cleanup, and again, without full reimbursement of what we've put into it as a tribe, to try to manage their mistake.
Thanks so much, Jamie, for adding that further information. Though obviously that's hard to hear again. We appreciate it. I was going to move to our most distinguished colleague who has a question, but I also saw Andrea, who's also very distinguished. But I saw Andrea also had their hand up. Andrea, were you wanting to respond directly to what Jamie shared, or should we move on to Nicole and our distinguished colleague?
I actually wanted to bring up also about the cleanup, is that we're talking about the Straits of Mackinac. If you see the picture behind me, that's the ice. How are we going to clean up if it happens underneath the ice? The Coast Guard has said it's impossible, and that our added ice will make it even more impossible. They're talking about boomers, plywood boomers in the summertime. You can't get that into the water during the ice. And look how thick that ice is. You're not going to be able to do anything. The fact of a cleanup is another fallacy. It's another lie.
Yeah, and with those risks, given the significance of the place for Anishinaabe origins and history, and I don't know a lot of people, if they haven't had that experience in their lives, I'd strongly suggest getting a good sense of empathy, actually, for what that would mean if they were in that situation. So, okay. So Nicole and Moses, we'd love to hear your question.
Well, I think you're right that the oil pipe has been doing a lot of damage, and this oil has been how it's covered in ice. It does make it even more impossible to do this ice stuff, but this oil has been doing a lot of damage. But how did it get so bad?
Thanks for the question, Moses. We appreciate it. Would one of our panelists respond? Opening it to Andrea or Biidaaban or Sean or Marty.
I'm a librarian at Moses' school, and this is the sort of question the children ask, and I've been sharing that We Are Water Protectors book with them. And if they ask a question like that, I'll say, I think it's lack of love. I think it's because when people didn't first think about being dependent and grateful on the water and the animals and everything else, then they didn't know how to do things the right way. So and when they get worried about it, and I say that's the right way to feel. And that's going to show you the way to where we can have things be in balance again. And I think a question like that is sort of where a lot of us started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the problems started with that we, the Native people in this community, were left out of the discussion. when they put that pipeline down there, they didn't ask us. They just went ahead and did it. And we found out later, a lot of us. And I think that's a lot of the problem, is that we weren't part of those decisions.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
add
you.
to that too. Also, Moses, you have a really cool name. That's actually my middle name also, and so that's just a really neat name. And my mom's last name. So that is a really important question. Like, how did it get this bad? Like, why? Like, we're all here today because like we're trying to like mitigate things now, but like back then, like when that pipeline was first put in there, people didn't know that it would do this. I'm assuming no one could be that heartless that they could think that it would rupture and impact all these people, like you, like me, like people who are going to be younger than you. So I think that, yeah, it's a lack of love. It's a lack of vision from them. But that's what we're doing now. That's what we're here today to do. That's what you're going to be part of, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing. And Moses, thanks for your question. That was the best stated question. No offense to the others, but and myself too, but that was the best stated question this entire event. And we appreciate your leaving us with that. And I do hope that you continue to speak up, to use your voice, to use your knowledge and your wisdom, because it's important. You've made a big difference for our conversation here today. So miigwech, and we appreciate you very much. We appreciate folks that did ask questions and engage, and thanks to the panelists for the response. I'd like to turn it to Andrea to close us for the event.
I just wanted to say miigwech to everybody that came. I really appreciate it. And learning every time if we gather, I learned something new. And I'm really glad to have these opportunities to learn. That's very, very important. So miigwech for everybody. Thank you for coming and helping us and to educate people. There's some people out there that still don't know about Line 5. As hard as I find that to believe, there are people in our state that do not know that's there. I just wanted to put out there that next week, Tuesday, we'll be talking about Mahnomen. Nat Spur will be on. He'll be talking with, I believe, Barb Barton, Roger Levine. We'll be talking about naming Mahnomen as Michigan's native grain. We're working on getting that resolution out there and passed. Also on the 30th, we have residential boarding schools. Julie Dye will be speaking on that. She's the secretary and founder of the Anishinaabek Caucus, along with Dr. Graham Denton, and who's a member of the caucus. So we've got some really good topics coming up. So please join us if you'd like to join in, and let us know. Hopefully next time we'll have our recording work out better so we can live stream. This is hoping to be temporary. So next week we're hoping to be back on track in Facebook Live and posting onto our website. So I appreciate everybody for rolling with us. And this is a little bump in the road, but we are good with dealing with bumps, huh? So miigwech, everyone.
Miigwech,
Miigwech,
Miigwech, thank you.